In this session, we'll look at an introduction to Geopak Road as well as Project Manager. The objectives here are to give you an introduction to Geopak, review the associated file names that are used within Geopak product, show you how to access Geopak. We'll discuss the user preferences and how those are set up. We'll create a project using Project Manager. We'll use Project Manager as a workflow guide and show you how to access the Geopak tools from the Project Manager. Now, as an introduction, Geopak is a comprehensive software package that basically takes you from the beginning of a project to the end. It's used within MicroStation so that you have the ability to use the graphics of MicroStation along with the computational features of Geopak that will result in a significant time saving for your project. Let's look at some of the files that are used in Geopak. The first is a GPK file. You'll notice that the format here is job, and then you have three of the number symbols .gpk. The numbers are 1, 2, or 3 alphanumeric characters that can be used as your job number, and these are selected by the user. This is the format that it will appear in your working directory, and we'll talk about working directories in a few minutes. But it is a binary file, and this is where all of the elements, the COGO elements that are created in coordinate geometry, are stored. Elements such as alignments, curves, points, etc. The next two files are files that are also associated with the coordinate geometry tool. You'll notice that the number symbols are also present in this file name. The F name is a name that you will give it, and the total number of characters that are available for the IOC and OOC, both of these file names that you see here, this particular file name and this file name, the file name is the total number of characters that are available for this particular file name are 8. So whatever, if you have a 2-digit job number, then you have 6 characters that are available for a file name. So the total number of characters, including the job number, is 8 characters. The IOC stands for input, or the I in O stands for input, the O is for output, the OC stands for operator code, or your initials, the user's initials. The next file, the file name .imp, are files that are created in the process of creating such things as design cross sections or super elevation shapes. It will create a .imp file, and then that imp file can be run to create those particular elements. The next file is a .dat file. File name .dat. This is a file that is either given to you or that you create from extracting information from a digital terrain model or a 3D file. It's an XYZ file, has XYZ information in it, and it's used to create the next file in our list, which is the 10 file, which represents our existing ground surface. The next is the .prj file, and this is the file that we'll create whenever we create our project through Project Manager shortly. So let's go into a MicroStation file, and we'll see how to access, first of all, Geopak Tools. If we go to Applications, select Applications, this particular button is here only if Geopak is loaded onto your machine. You will have an Applications button. Now, the first time you select this button, you may see something that says Civil Only. You may see only Civil, and if you go out to the right here, it may say Activate. It will say Activate Civil. You hit Activate Civil, and it loads the elements, all these modules that have been loaded onto your machine. In this case, we have the Geopak Suite, which is drainage, landscape, road, site, survey, and water and sewer. Now, in the V8i format, we also have these tools on the left-hand side. All of our road tools are here. Our DTM tools, our geometry, survey, our CAD tools for drawing. We have our site, drainage, water, sewer, plan prep, quantities, landscape, and geotechnical. So all of these are in a format that if we hit the little down arrow here, you'll notice that all this information is accessible from these pull downs. Right? Now, the first thing we want to look at is Project Manager. Now we can access Project Manager from here, from these tools on the top, or we can come into our road tools and access Project Manager from here. So we'll go in and access Project Manager, and we get this tool, this little dialog box. Now, prior to accessing or creating a project with Project Manager, the thing that we should do first is come up to Applications, Geopak Road, and go to something called User Preferences. Once we select User Preferences, we get this dialog box. Now this is preferences that should be set up for each project. It gives us a unit format, whether we want to use English or metric, a coordinate format, either northing, easting, or XY. We want to use a bearing or azimuth as far as direction. We have 3 different options that we can choose from for a station format. And then we have something to the right called output accuracy. This has nothing to do with computation accuracy. What it allows us to do is tell Geopak how many decimal places we want to see whenever this information is displayed on the screen. In this case, I've chosen 2 decimal places for all the distance station and the angle seconds. The next row here in your user preferences is working directory. This is where you would put in the path to your project directory. This is so that Geopak knows where to place files that have been created and also where to access files that are needed. The next button here we have is Feature Preferences. Feature Preferences has to do with a file called an SMD file. In this case, the default is loaded. The default is the file that is delivered, one of many files that's delivered with Geopak. All of these files that are delivered with the product are stored in the bin directory, Geopak bin directory. This information is the information that the surveyor would use out in the field, such as line codes, point codes. Once that information is loaded, it gives you access to that information from the field. The next thing is the COGO preferences. The COGO preference box should look like this whenever it's filled out. You should have query in the top. You should have force redefinition off upon COGO activation toggled on and redefinition of elements toggled off. Now let's talk about these for a minute. The GPK file open mode, the query, the reason we select query is that what this does is when we create a GPK file, it will, or give it a number to create a GPK file, it will go into the working directory. It will look in that directory. If it finds a file, a GPK file with the same name, it will come back with an alert box and say, this file is found, do you want to overwrite it? If it doesn't find one in our working directory, then it will come back with an alert box that says this file was not found, do you want to create it? In which case you would say yes. Now you have the ability to go in and create a additional directory for your GPK files, for your input, your COGO input and output files within your project directory. It's not necessary to do this. If you leave these files or areas blank, they will automatically be placed in your working directory, which is perfectly fine. Redefinition of elements has to do with redefining elements. In other words, if I have a point, we'll say point 100 stored in my GPK file, that particular point has coordinates. if I wanted to change those coordinates, I would have to make sure that redefine is turned on. If it's not, it will come back with a message saying that this point already exists. So it's a safeguard to keep you from overriding existing points. But this is not where we turn that information on. It's in our COGO box is where that's turned on. What this does is it forces redefinition off whenever we whenever we close Geopak and open Geopak COGO and open it again, redefine will be turned off. And that is another safeguard that makes sure that if we want to redefine an element, that we have to go physically turn that on once again. Once this information is filled out, we just say OK, and then we say OK. Now you'll notice it says show this dialog upon startup. If you want to see this every time you start Geopak, then you can just toggle that on. And a lot of people want this to come up automatically, and to do that, just toggle it on, and whenever you get into Geopak, this will automatically come up. If you don't want it to do that, just toggle it off, and we'll say OK. So once we have our our user preferences set up, then we can go into Project Manager. And Project Manager, first of all, wants to know our working directory. Now we're going to set up our working directory from here. We can double click, and every time we double click in that little double dot area, it takes us back one directory. And then we can go to Class, Data, Geo. We can just navigate to our file, and we'll go to Geopak Road, Data, Geo, Road 1. Okay. Now, once we are there, then we can go to Project, and we can say New Project. But before we do that, you notice that below here, in this area, first of all, we have our working directory. This is where that's going to appear. Then right below this, we have something called Filter and Type. That should be set. Filter should be set to star.prj, and type should be set to project, because that's the only thing that you really want to see in this particular area under projects. Now, to create a new project, we would go to Projects, New, and we would go to and just give it a project name. Give it a working directory. We can select that working directory. Put that in there. And this is where you would create a job number. In other words, if I want to come in and say I want my job number to be 10A. And then once that's done, you'll notice that there is a preference button over here that's going to bring up our user preferences if we want to check to make sure that those are the same. Once this information is in here, now keep in mind that we're creating this job number. This job number does not exist. So, and it's going to be placed in this particular directory. So once I hit OK, there is the little alert box that comes up, and it says this was not found. Do you want to create it? And we're going to say yes, we do. So there we have videoclass.prj. We have a job number .10a. And then once we come into this area, you'll notice that you can have multiple projects here. So you actually have to go in and select the project you want, the PRJ file you want, and say OK. Now that takes us to our next box, which is project users. You can have as many users as you need or want. You can also have as many projects as you want. So if we wanted to create a new user, we would go Users, New, give it a name, a full name, an operator code, which is just the initials, and say OK. And it says, do you wish to define a password for this user? 99.9 times out of 100 you're going to say no, because you really don't deal with as sensitive material enough to require passwords. And secondly, if a person leaves or goes on vacation, that information is tied up. So we're just going to say no. Go student. Once again, you can have multiple users, so we have to select the one we want and then say OK. Now what that does is it brings up this box, and you'll notice that this box has some transparency set to it. That is a feature of V8i. So if we hit that button, we can make this all the way to the left for 0 transparency, which is the full version. We can also come in and put whatever transparency we want. Now even at 100 we can still see the box, but we're going to put this all the way over to the left to 100 and say OK. And then this is our Project Manager box. Now it's very important whenever you open a project that you notice this information up here to make sure that you're in the right project area, that you've got the right user selected and the right job number. Now we have under Remember, under File, first of all we have Close and Exit. If we hit Close, it takes us back to the previous dialog box. If we hit Exit, it takes us all the way out. Now under Remember, we should, if you're working in one project exclusively, not working in multiple projects but working in one project exclusively, then you can come in and toggle on Project and also toggle on User. Now what that does is simply this. If I go over and say File, Exit, then I go and select Project Manager again, then it automatically brings me back to this box without making me go in through the other two dialog boxes of selecting a project and selecting a user. It bypasses that and takes me here. Now this gets to be dangerous if you're working in multiple projects, because you hit that button, it's going to bring you here. If you don't look in this area up here, make sure you're in the right project directory with the right job number, you could actually store information in the wrong project, and that has been done before. So if you're working in multiple projects, just toggle Project off, and what that will do is whenever you close, say File, Exit, and go back to Project Manager, it will bring you to the project dialog box first, so you can choose the right project, say OK, and then it bypasses the user and brings you to here. Now you'll notice that we have a lot of information in this box. Working Alignment Influence Run. What this does is it allows you to save information in a resource file as you create that information in your project. And we would save it under the Define button. So we go under Define, and we would find our plan view. We'd put our DGN file, wherever our plan is drawn. The chain that's in there, beginning and ending station, will come up automatically. Then we go in and we can put in our patterns, our shapes, our profile views, where those are located, sections, cross sections, existing ground cross sections, and proposed, and then our DTM information. Now the purpose of all this is once that information is filled in, it resides in a resource file, and when we go into things like earthwork or proposed cross sections, it'll ask us if we want to use the working alignment definition. And if we toggle that on, it will go and read that resource file so that we don't have to remember where our pattern lines are. We don't have to remember certain information. It'll all be brought into that particular dialog box for us from that resource file. You'll notice that we can access files or tools from here, existing ground, or our DTM tools, our existing ground cross sections. This is a workflow. You'll notice these lines. This is the workflow diagram that takes us from existing ground, our DTM information, all the way down to our plan and profile sheets. Now if we select any one of these, and let's go in and say, for instance, coordinate geometry. Coordinate geometry, when you select coordinate geometry, there is no run box. And we'll look at the run box here in just a minute. There is no run box. It takes you directly into coordinate geometry. But if I go into, say, existing ground cross sections, it gives me something called a select run box. And what this is simply the ability to go in and create different scenarios. For instance, if I wanted to create my existing ground cross sections at, for instance, let's say 3:1 horizontal vertical scale, I could go in here and say run new, and I could call that we'll say XS 3:1. All right, and say OK. And then I would go in here and say OK and fill out all the information necessary for running those at 3:1. But if I wanted to also try 2:1, I could go in here, create another run at 2:1, fill out all that information. All the run box does is allows you to go in and create these runs without losing that information, so that if I decided after running the cross sections at 2:1 that I like the 3:1 version better, I haven't lost that information. I could actually come back and select this, and all the data that I filled in for 3:1 would be there. It's a very helpful tool. All right. And once again, like I said, this takes you all the way through all the tools. This is where you would select your tools for existing ground cross sections, super elevations, your vertical alignments. All the information you need is here. The other tools that you would use in road, all your DTM tools are broken out. On the left hand side here, your geometry tools, survey, your CAD tools, your MicroStation CAD tools are here. So everything's accessible from the left hand toolbar. Okay. All right, well, that concludes our look at, first of all, an introduction to Geopak and also Project Manager.